Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well and you've had a good year. I'm sure it's been interesting, if nothing else. Sorry, you'll have to excuse my voice. A bit of a cold and too much talking, I think. But bear with me, and hopefully it doesn't run out before the end. My name is Kirsty Butcher, and I'm product director at trade publication Place North West and PlaceTech. So we have two publications, and they focus on property and the property industry. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them shortly. But first, I just wanted to show you a couple of facts. So in 2020, 306 billion emails were sent. And the average office worker receives 120 emails a day. Granted, this might have changed in the past year with the rise of Teams and Slack for internal communications, but it's still a lot of messages to handle. It's still a lot of words that we're confronted with, an awful lot of noise. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed with the amount of information, the amount of incoming messages in my professional and personal life. Your brain can only digest so much. And this poses something of an issue for publishing, an industry that deals with words, with language, with information, a world that's increasingly digital. So how do we cut through all that noise? How do you keep your readers, your users engaged, loyal, especially in a time of so much change, when there are tensions being pulled in 1,000 different directions? So today I'm going to talk to you about driving engagement in times of change. And that's not to say that we've done this perfectly or that we have the right answer, but I think we have hopefully an interesting perspective and experience to share as a business-to-business publisher, as a digital-only publisher, and as a small publisher. So a little about our two publications. Place North West focuses on property news, effectively hard business news with a strict regional focus on the northwest of England and North Wales. The publication launched in 2007 during the first ripples of the economic crash. But the title was born out of a booming industry in the region that wasn't being covered much at all, really, by the national trade publishers, with a huge amount of investment and a lot of property professionals in the region. It was just crying out for a way of connecting these people up and keeping them informed on all the property deals, the progress, the opportunities that were popping up. And when I joined in early 2015, I was employee number 3. And I was the first non-editorial member of staff as well. We're a tiny office in the Royal Exchange building in Manchester. But our founder had built up a really great reputation locally for quality industry news. And we were digital only, ahead of the trend in 2007. So back when I joined, we had 40,000 monthly users at that point. We did 6 or 7 events a year. And in the past 6 years, we've grown our readership by more than 500%. And we're now running about just under 30 events a year. And it's a free subscription model. We have 12,500 subscribers at the moment, it's North West, and we generate our revenue mostly from advertising campaigns and events. So a little about PlaceTech now. PlaceTech covers a newish sector known as PropTech. And I'm sure you heard the buzz around fintech, financial technology. Well, there's a similar buzz around PropTech, property technology. It's all about the tech solutions that are transforming the way that real estate is developed and sold and managed, invested in, the way that buildings are built, the way that engineers and architects and planners work. And it's a huge sector. There was 2.6 billion poured into PropTech firms in 2020, according to KPMG. And we noticed that the information was dominated by bloggers at that time. And from our Place North West readers, we realised that there was a huge disconnect between these prop tech startups and the very traditional real estate firms. And the property firms were sort of confused about the tech, and the tech firms were struggling to get a foothold in with these property companies. And there was no independent media company providing information. So we ran a market review and a business viability project in summer of 2017. And then we launched in February 2018. And it was one hell of a 6-month period and a bit of a leap of faith. But we had confidence in the need that was out there because we knew our property readers well. We knew this was a gap in the market and a problem that our readers had in understanding all this new tech that's coming out and these new sort of strategies that were appearing in a sort of haze. And since launching at the start of 2018, we now have 6,500 subscribers of our weekly news roundup, with readers from across the world. It's about 50% UK, 50% outside the UK in terms of readership. And again, we have a free subscription model, earning revenue from advertising campaigns and events, which was a model that we found successful in Place North West. And across the titles, our products now comprise mainly of a range of daily and weekly newsletters, podcasts, thought leadership products in the form of user-generated content sections and video, advertising campaigns and events. And my role in all of this is to oversee the delivery and the development of those. And as part of that, it's my job to understand and act on behalf of our readers, our users, and also our advertisers and sponsors, make sure it's working for them, that they're getting what they need. And we're a small team, so of course I get stuck into whatever needs doing. As a product manager, in the words of Matt Valez, a former Google product manager, you are among things a janitor. It involves doing some of the dirty work to keep things moving and to clear a path, for the success of the product and the efficiency of the team. Excuse me. And onto the pandemic. It was obviously an interesting and stressful time for most of us, and everyone had their own particular set of problems. For us, we were already digital and digital only. And of course, all attention switched to online as offices shut and social distancing restrictions came in. So, we thought, perfect, we're built for this, while our competitors scrabbled around trying to get their print magazines redirected to readers' homes and hoping that they wouldn't stop paying for it altogether, we just carried on doing what we did. But as everything moved online, there was suddenly a lot of noise on all of our devices, a lot of things coming at you, and not to mention the matter of no events, but I shall come on to that. So how to cut through all that noise? Now, I think the key is to keep your reader and your customer front and center of your mind at all times, and worry about what they need and just focus really on delivering it. So how do you know what they need? Well, you speak to them. You make sure you understand them. And for us, one of the major problems of the pandemic was the stopping of events. And not only was this half of our revenue, but it's also a crucial part of our offering and our sort of relevancy to readers, and a way of staying in touch with them. That's something that's important for all of our departments, really. It helps the journalists to find out what's happening out there to get new leads. It helps the sales team to find new leads and find out trends that might be, might help them with where to go for new clients, and a way of me and my team getting feedback on what we're delivering. And we knew during the pandemic, we knew that we needed to replace the events with something else in order to keep our readers' attention and to replace the lost revenue stream. And our team's well set up for quick action. We're a small team, we're quite a sort of small agile boat in comparison to some big companies that are more like ships that are sort of hard to turn around. So we thought, right, what do we do? And it comes down to that crucial deep understanding of your readers. It's having feedback systems open during that sort of late spring period of 2020, when we're all getting to grips with our working from home setups. We sent out a reader survey with the narrative of asking people to help us deliver what they need at that time. And we went a bit further than we would usually do. We asked questions that we hadn't been quite so bold to ask before. What would they pay for virtual events? We asked for brutal feedback on certain products. What news do they need to know? Are they bored of hearing about the pandemic? Do they need to hear about the pandemic? So we just kept speaking to readers. We called them up. We kept chatting. We made ourselves approachable as individuals, even on social media. And we did a meet the team campaign to get sort of our faces out there and make it so that people might want to speak to us. And I think that time spent speaking to your end users is never wasted. No matter how informal the systems are for feedback, it's all really useful. Even if you have no plan of what you want to talk to them about, you'll be amazed at what you learn by just opening up a channel for a chat. And really listen as well. It's a bit of a lost art. And I just wanted to recommend a book here for anyone working in the product space, but also just anyone who has conversations ever with anyone, is called Listen Like You Mean It by Jimena Bengoechea. And she's done research for Twitter and Instagram, Pinterest. And it's got some really interesting tips for sort of really engaging with people. Some of it's really clever. Some of it's that kind of stuff that sits just below your kind of conscious mind, and you think, oh, yes, of course, that makes sense. And Jimena would tell you to make a conscious effort to be curious when you're talking to people. Try and put away those desires to hear what you want and to impress your own experience or opinion onto what people are saying to you. And also to follow the thread where it leads, rather than trying to make the conversation go down particular routes. It can be really helpful to just find out things that you didn't know. And don't get bogged down by trying to remember everything. I think that's a useful thing to think. Trust that you'll remember the really important stuff, so that you sort of stay present. And one thing I think as well is just making a safe space for it, so that people know that they won't offend you. There won't be consequences from telling you what they really think, and just sort of putting them at ease at the start. It'd be really great to know what you really think about X, Y, and Z. And then from that, you build up these anecdotes, and unlike quantitative feedback, they give you sort of nuance, and of course you don't know what you don't know, and some of that information you just wouldn't find out from feedback forms or chatbots or what you might have. I was just going to tell you a story here. So at one of our events, I got chatting to a property developer, one of our close contacts, someone we've known for a while, and he was telling me about how reading the Place daily briefing, one of our daily newsletters from Place North West, how reading that every lunchtime was almost like a ritual for him. And I'd spoken to him hundreds of times, but this time I asked him, so what sort of what kind of articles do you tend to read mostly? What will pull you in? And he said, oh, I don't ever read any of them. I just read through the headlines and I read the little excerpts in the newsletter, but I don't ever click through. And at first I was horrified that one of our most loyal readers and people that we engage with just doesn't click through to any of our articles. And it made me think, oh God, are we giving too much away? Are we not making them click through? Do we need to be more clickbaity? But then when I probed a little, it turned out that was exactly why he read our newsletter every day and not our competitors, because that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted a quick overview of what's happening in the region. And that's what we're giving to him. He doesn't have time for detail. And what he does click through on are the stories about events that we're running. Perfect. Or stories about clients of his, that he needs to know. And of course, he still sees the adverts on the daily newsletter, to put it brutally, we're still getting value out of him as a subscriber. And of course, we want to, keep finding ways to keep him engaged. But if I'd have looked at his subscriber profile from our database, I would have thought he was an unengaged reader. But he's a happy reader. And another thing I found out from readers is that the importance of us, our platform, as an archive to these people. Before client meetings, they'll search the client's name on Place North West and make sure that they know the latest schemes that they've been involved in, or if there's been a change of the senior leadership team, at the company or any of that kind of stuff. So, building up this picture of this kind of behavior is so important and interesting. And I think these kind of stories are really invaluable to your products and to your publications. But to get a detailed and quantitative analysis, once you've kind of got those stories and you want to sort of back them up or build on them, and that's where the tech comes in. So I thought I would share with you a behavior tracking solution that we've used this past year called Mouseflow, which you may have heard of. So Mouseflow is a mouse tracking software, and it is great for showing you how readers are really engaging with your digital products on a micro level. And there are a few of these sort of mouse tracking software solutions out there. So what it does is it generates heat maps based not just where people click, but also where they move their mouse. Because people do generally tend to read with their mouse, move their mouse to where they're looking. And it also lets you replay individual sessions. You can watch how someone scrolls and moves around your pages. It's a little eerie, it feels slightly perverse, but the data is all completely anonymized. It's GDPR compliant. And you can see desktop sessions, you can see mobile sessions. And it means you can ask yourself questions like, does anyone really engage with this element of the website? Questions that you can't get from standard web analytics software, like how many people actually use this column on the left of our website? Can we use that for something else? Does anyone use the calendar in the event page, for searching events? How far do people scroll down the page? How much do people linger on images? And it also helps you to spot what Mouseflow calls friction events, which is where, it might be where people are clicking on something, they expect to go through to something, and it's not a clickable element. So it's really good for kind of flagging that kind of stuff. And you could lose hours looking into it. So armed with all this information, during the pandemic, we found out that what people really wanted was a deeper analysis of what's happening in the market, because there was so much sort of flux and change at that time. And generally, we'd heard people saying this in the past as well, they'd like the in-depth, that there was a really strong sort of need for it. So, we decided that we needed to diversify our products to reach people in, a range of different ways to kind of match this huge spectrum of different behaviours that people ended up with during the pandemic, managing children and working different hours. And so we launched a series of podcasts, we launched videos, we also launched a new weekly analytical editorial product, which I'm going to talk to you a little about, which we called The Subplot. And this was about getting behind the headlines, quite sort of incisive analysis, digging deeper into what's happening, pulling at those sort of threads and stories. And we stopped ourselves sort of getting too bogged down in too much process. When you're trying to launch something new like this, we wanted to be quite quick with it, try to keep quite light on our feet. And in December last year, one of our guys created a mock-up of how it would look, and we teamed up with a well-known and respected freelance journalist in the region. He whipped up some first articles as a bit of just to show people what it would feel like. We showed it to clients. We got 4 sponsors on board, and I cracked on with the production process, and we started sending it in January, a month later. To get to this, we'd had a lot of ideas about how what we might launch, how this might work, but we did what Adam Nash would call brutal prioritization. He was on the product team at Apple and eBay, LinkedIn, Dropbox, I think. It's all really about sort of focusing on the highest impact tasks and the lowest effort tasks, and trying to sort of filter out the stuff that doesn't need to be done now, that can be done later, focusing on that sort of the core fundamentals of it and just getting it moving. And we kept channels open with our readers. We sent them feedback surveys. I called some up, and we found out 2 key things. People thought it was too long. For trying to deliver these longer reads that people have been asking for, we went a bit too far, apparently. And some of our readers hadn't clocked that it was from us when it was landing with them. They're getting all of those emails in, and they sort of hadn't even figured out that it was from us. So we did some A/B testing, and we found that if we put Place Northwest in the subject line, we get more engagement. And so we played around with a few things and adapted it for what readers were saying. And we sent it every Tuesday at 8 a.m. We made sure to do exactly that, not a minute later. And we built it into our reader habit so that it becomes part of people's week. We've been told a lot by the market that lunchtime in North West property is the time to read the Place Daily Briefing. And now Tuesday morning is becoming the time for longer in-depth reads, with a bit of juicy gossip that people can take into their meetings for the rest of the week. And we now have 3,000 core readers of that a week and growing. So the Holy Grail, user loyalty. Now, I think you get there by doing what you say you'll do when you say you were going to do it, being consistent, building up that trust, that habit, that reliance, not pushing dates back, not delivering more or less all the time, but doing exactly what people expect. And knowing the user inside out, which comes from speaking to them, from keeping those channels open. And dog fooding, which is a phrase that some of you will know. It's sort of testing your own products obsessively, in the wild, eating the dog food that you sell, so that you can see it from your user's point of view. And then striking a balance between giving them what feels familiar, comfortable, easy for them, and adding in layers of new elements to keep it fresh and give them these moments of pleasant surprise that fit in with their experience but add another layer of value. Place Northwest website looks fairly old school, really. Design hasn't changed a huge amount since the time it was built, really. But we've gathered a lot of feedback on the design, and as much as I would love to do a revamp, we repeatedly told, please don't change it. You know, we have a very traditional reader base, and they're used to the experience. It works for them. They use it every day. So when we add in new designs, new functionality, new elements, we try not to alter the look and the feel of the website too much. And adapting to their behavior, not expecting them to change their habits and their expectations based on what suits your taste and your project, keeping it about them. But one area that we couldn't have that approach so much on recently was events. So if we go back to what our readers need, is ultimately business development opportunities and networking. And that was something that's basically impossible when social distancing laws came in, as you'll all know. We moved to Zoom events pretty quickly after the pandemic started, but we found our readers were really missing the networking. We already knew that 50% came to our events before the pandemic, mainly for the networking. And people were telling us, you know, oh, I miss bumping into people, and I miss having conversations with people that I wouldn't necessarily call up. Miss being able to meet new people in a less pressured environment than the 2-minute timed sessions that you get on Hopin. Anyone tried those? It's slightly speed dating style. So we researched different solutions. We found a platform called Remo that allowed what we found to be the sort of most natural networking that we'd come across for an online event. You basically have this floor plan of an event space. This is at one of our events, and you can see different people on tables, and you can move around the tables in your own time, meet different people. So you can look at this and go, oh, such and such is on that table. I'll just pop in and join them. And in a way, it's almost better than having to sort of politely wait for a time to interrupt someone's conversation. You just plow right in, and there's your face. And if people want a private conversation, they can meet at those 2-person tables, and no one else can join. Yeah, it was built originally as a remote working app for the pandemic, but was cleverly adapted for events at the start of the pandemic. And you got customizable floor plans. There's various ways of making it feel like your event, getting the sponsor branding in there. And you got the networking and then panels and presentations work as well, of course. This was me at one of our first ones, and I can't tell you how incredible it felt to just be able to bump into people like that again. It worked really well for us. We were able to charge £30 for tickets. We managed to get sponsors on board and retain sponsors on board for some of the events that we had already planned to do in person. And yeah, we had about 150 people register for morning conferences on average at the peak, and the dropout rate was incredibly low. It was about 10%, very similar to what we had for in-person conferences. And we ran 26 virtual conferences that way, 200 speakers, 2,500 guests. And we managed to keep the sponsors happy. We kept the guests happy. We kept the revenue coming in. We had these channels again for connecting with our audience. And we even held ticketed Christmas social across both publications. Actually, we had people tuning in from all across the world, from New York, from Amsterdam, from Wigan, all these people sort of colliding. And for Place North West, we have a very traditional audience. Let's say they're not the most tech savvy. So it did take a concerted effort to get them on board with the platform, and we made video guides. We had people circulating the room to help them with tech issues and encourage them to sort of get involved with various elements. So it worked really well, but in May this year, we found that readers were just desperate to get back to in-person events again, as soon as the health situation allowed. And so we launched hybrid events. where we held in-person conferences with lower capacities, and we live streamed them via Remo, so that people could opt to network online, or they could network in person, and either way they can hear the conference content. What we found exceptionally popular since the pandemic sort of eased is our networking events. That's what people have been missing after all. Can't live stream those, but yeah, in October we held this 700-person event in Manchester, which was surreal. Guests had to have the NHS COVID pass, and it was somewhat of an admin headache, but it was so worth it to get so many of our readers back in one room, and to give the people what they want. I've never been in an atmosphere quite like that one. And there were definitely some sore heads across Manchester the next day, I can tell you. So what next for events? Well, I wish I could tell you definitively. But as soon as we launched the physical event tickets, the virtual tickets started to dip. And there's definitely been a lot of in-person event excitement. But who knows what things will level out at this stage. We've had a lot of feedback that people found it's the virtual events, it means it's a lot less time to sort of carve out from your day if you're joining online. Having this hybrid model means that people can decide last minute that they can't make a physical event. They can join online, or they can watch a recording later. I think this is really the era of flexibility, and people have become quite accustomed to having a level of flexibility in their working life. And the more places that you can offer that to people, the more they're likely to keep coming back. It does help with that sort of trust side of things, I think. But one thing's for sure, we're going to be paying close attention to what users want. I'll be calling them. We'll be asking them at events. So I hope my somewhat niche publishing perspective has sparked some ideas for you. To sort of wrap up, I think to keep your users engaged during these changing times, and to build a bit of a sort of future-proof strategy for how you work, it comes down to keeping the user in mind at all times, keeping channels open with them. Any way of getting feedback is good. You might say that all feedback is good feedback if you're feeling particularly rose-spectacled about it. Really listen to your readers, and try things out. Don't get too bogged down in the process. I know that can be harder for some forms of company and some larger companies, but if you can just keep trialing and try and keep those sort of softer, informal tests going, and I think you'll see the benefits. So I hope that's been of some interest, some use to you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I hope you're still all awake. Before I get started on some questions, I just thought I'd say, if anyone wants to have a chat about anything or share any ideas, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, or hopefully see you at the networking session tomorrow. So I think, Yadu, you were asking about occupancy. So yeah, I mean, we obviously cover property news, so this is kind of area we're looking into. There is a surprising lack of information at the minute. Often the sort of the office agency forums will release stats on a kind of quarterly basis. So I think the last figures that we've got were end of the summer, and things are on about a 50% in Manchester anyway, which is at the time, that was just before the sort of September date that people were, we knew anecdotally people were talking about coming back. But I think there's such a huge variation, and property is a very traditional market. And for our actual readers, I think it's a lot higher than that, because they are based on an industry that's dealing with sort of physical building of things. And so there's, the surveyors need to be around, people want to be on site for various things. From our point of view, we are all doing a hybrid working kind of setup at the moment. I'm in 2 days a week, and the rest of the team, it kind of varies. I was surprised at how many people wanted to be back in the office, particularly the younger members of the team. We all get the public transport in, which is good for our climate plan, David, but does mean that you are coming into contact with more people. And so doing the 2 days a week thing kind of helps to reduce your exposure a bit. Mind you, I still keep getting colds. And question from Stephen: email newsletters seem to have had a real revival in recent times. Why do you think they so appeal to people? Well, I think you're hitting people right where they are. They're in their emails, and it's sort of quite convenient to be able to just click on the next email that comes through and keep in touch that way. We know that some of our readers have said, we're talking about our rivals, that they end up with sort of, a stack of cellophane wrapped magazines at the end of the year that haven't been opened, that they have to chuck because people haven't come across them or made the time to read them. And it's just kind of getting to people where they are. And they're not having to remember, how they log into certain things and how, passwords and things. So it's just that kind of convenience, I think. It's my opinion anyway. Is there anything else? What about rates? Did they fall last year? Have they started going up? Initially, they did fall. I think because people were getting used to their new way of working and dealing with their own problems, and B, that there was a lot, as I said, there was a lot of noise and everything was kind of moving online. A lot of companies were suddenly desperate to have a way of getting to people. And so there was a lot of emails coming in. Then when I think that kind of leveled out a bit and people got used to their ways of working and they thought, right, I need to be armed with the latest information on property deals and all of that, then we started to go up. So yeah, we're kind of, when we launched the subplot as well at the start of January, that helped generally because we were helping to keep people engaged throughout the week. It was another way of kind of getting to them. So yeah, it's onwards and upwards. For PlaceTech, that's an area that we're looking at over the next year, is sort of really driving that more and more. Are landlords offering carbon numbers for their properties as a differentiator? Is there any initiative by local government to make them declare these numbers? As far as I'm aware, I don't think there is at the moment. Whether that will change. I think from what I've heard, the people aren't getting as much of the sort of pushing from the occupier side, really, as you would, as I would be wanting and expecting at the moment. And so this is partly part of the problem, I think, is that either people aren't being vocal about it, or maybe just, over the past 18 months, it's been less of a priority than just keeping the door open. But I think that's part of the issue, is that it's the most proactive landlords at the moment that are trying to create a sort of future-proof strategy rather than having to have this data to hand. And mainly, I think people in property are at the stage of collecting the data. They're not yet at the point of kind of using it and acting on it. Generally, there's obviously a lot of innovators and it's a huge spectrum. But there is a huge amount of landlords that are just at the very beginning of this kind of digital process and environmental, sustainability process. We've actually done a COP26 podcast series, mainly on Place North West, that we started publishing those in September, and the final ones are going out this week as a sort of lead up. And we've done 18 of those, about half an hour long podcasts on various different things, and been really pleased with the sort of listenership for those, and just the amount of companies that wanted to be involved in them to show what they're doing. I think that it's all out there and it's all starting to happen. It really could do with more. At the moment, the industry is ahead of the legislation, which is ridiculous. So hopefully, the government will start on really pushing companies to do this. Our big in-person conference is back in the North West. They're starting to be, yes. Before we did that 700 person one, there was an 1100 person one, an award show. So yeah, it's starting to happen now. We've found that some, our customers, our end users are in very different kind of places. Some of them are, no, I'm just going to join in on the kind of hybrid, the hybrid conferences and do some online networking. We've got people that are just desperate to be back at any event that they can go to go out and meet people, especially people that are in the kind of business development world. But yeah, we definitely found that as soon as we launched the in-person events, that they just took off, and the hybrid take-up's been a bit, the online take-up's been a bit less than I would have expected. But it may be that it's that kind of initial excitement period and it needs to level out, and we'll be keeping a close eye on what things will look like over the next year. Was your readership impacted by the lack of in-person events last year? I think so. I don't have any data to back it up, to be honest. It's kind of quite hard to build that kind of cross online, offline data. But I think so. It's just, our events are a good way of keeping ourselves in the minds of people, reaching new readers, having ways of people sort of connecting and talking about us and about the news. So personally, I think so. And one thing I thought when I was watching that back was I didn't give quite the context of how small a company we are. We are 10 people. So when I say small, I mean it. We have 3 editorial staff and 2 sales staff, 4 product staff, and a network of freelancers that help. So yes, it can be good. It can be good for that kind of agile way of working and acting quickly on things, but it also means you've got the constant challenge of resourcing things. Okay, I think we're just about at my time now. But thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Yadu and Amateur and everyone at NEC for organising this. And I'll look forward to hopefully seeing you at the networking session tomorrow. And yeah, if there's any further questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on there as well.